Marcus Williams adjusted his tie as he walked through the busy airport terminal. At 45 years old, he had built Sterling Tech from a small startup in his garage to one of the most successful technology companies in the country. Today, he was flying to Chicago for a major business meeting that could change everything for his company. Marcus had always preferred to fly quietly, without drawing attention to his success. He dressed simply in a navy blue suit and carried a worn leather briefcase that had been with him since his early days as an entrepreneur. Most people who saw him wouldn't guess that he was worth over $200 million. The flight to Chicago was important. Marcus was meeting with potential investors who wanted to partner with Sterling Tech on a groundbreaking artificial intelligence project. This deal could bring in $50 million in funding and help his company expand internationally. He had worked for months preparing for this presentation. As he approached Gate 12, Marcus noticed the usual crowd of business travelers and families waiting to board. He pulled out his phone and reviewed his notes one more time. The presentation had to be perfect. Everything depended on making a good impression on these investors. When the airline staff announced that first-class passengers could begin boarding, Marcus gathered his belongings and joined the line. He had purchased a first-class ticket because he needed the quiet space to review his materials during the flight. The extra cost meant nothing compared to the importance of this meeting. The flight attendant at the gate was a young woman with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore the standard airline uniform and had a polite smile as she checked tickets. When Marcus handed her his boarding pass, she looked at it carefully, then looked at him with a confused expression. "Sir, I think there might be some mistake with your ticket," she said, her voice uncertain. Marcus looked at his boarding pass again. It clearly showed seat 2A first class with his name printed correctly. "I don't see any problem," he replied calmly. "This is my seat assignment." The flight attendant, whose name tag read Jennifer, seemed uncomfortable. She looked around nervously before speaking again. "Well, sometimes there are computer errors. With seat assignments, maybe you should check with the customer service desk to make sure everything is correct." Other passengers in line behind Marcus began to shift impatiently. A businessman in an expensive suit tapped his foot and checked his watch. A woman with 2 small children looked annoyed at the delay. Marcus could feel their eyes on him as the situation became more awkward. "My ticket is correct," Marcus said firmly but politely. "I'd like to board the plane now, please." Jennifer's face flushed red. She seemed to be struggling with what to say next. Finally, she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Look, sir, I'm just trying to help you avoid embarrassment. Sometimes people end up in the wrong section by accident. Coach is perfectly comfortable, and I'm sure we can find you a nice seat there." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. He realized what was happening. Despite his expensive suit, his successful business, and his valid first-class ticket, this flight attendant was assuming he didn't belong in first class because of the color of his skin. Marcus had faced discrimination before, especially in his early days as an entrepreneur. Banks had refused him loans, investors had dismissed his ideas, and some business partners had treated him with suspicion. But he thought those days were mostly behind him. His success had opened doors and earned him respect in the business world. Now, standing in line at the airport, Marcus felt the familiar anger rising in his chest. But he had learned over the years that losing his temper rarely solved anything. Instead, he took a deep breath and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "I understand. You're trying to do your job," he said to Jennifer, "but my ticket is correct and I have every right to sit in the seat I paid for. I'd appreciate it if you would allow me to board now." Jennifer looked around again, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Other passengers were starting to mumble complaints about the delay. The businessman behind Marcus spoke up loudly. "Come on, what's the holdup? Some of us have important meetings to get to." A security guard who had been standing nearby began walking toward the gate. Marcus noticed him approaching and felt his heart rate increase. He knew that if this situation escalated, he could end up missing his flight and losing the biggest business opportunity of his career. Jennifer seemed to make a decision. She handed Marcus back his boarding pass but continued to look skeptical. Fine, you can board. But if there are any issues with your seat, you'll need to work it out with the flight crew. Marcus took his boarding pass and walked down the jetway, toward the airplane. His mind was racing with thoughts about what had just happened. He couldn't believe that in today's world, he was still dealing with people who made assumptions based on his appearance. As he entered the airplane, Marcus was greeted by the head flight attendant, an older woman named Patricia. She smiled warmly and welcomed him aboard. Marcus began to feel a bit better as he made his way toward his seat in row 2. But his relief was short-lived. As he approached seat 2A, he saw that another passenger was already sitting there. It was a middle-aged white man in a golf shirt, reading a newspaper and sipping coffee. The man looked up as Marcus approached. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely. "I think you're in my seat." The man looked at Marcus with annoyance. "I don't think so, buddy. I've got seat 2A. He held up his boarding pass without really showing it clearly. Marcus pulled out his own boarding pass and showed it to the man. "This is my ticket for seat 2A. Perhaps you should check yours again." The man barely glanced at Marcus's ticket. "Look, there must be some confusion. Why don't you go find a flight attendant and sort this out? I'm comfortable right here." Patricia, the head flight attendant, appeared at Marcus's side. She had overheard the conversation and stepped in to help. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" "This man is claiming my seat," the white passenger said, gesturing dismissively toward Marcus. Patricia looked at both boarding passes carefully. It was immediately clear that Marcus had the correct ticket for seat 2A. The other passenger's ticket was for seat 12B in economy class. "Sir," Patricia said to the white passenger, "your seat is actually in row 12. I'll be happy to show you where that is." The man's face turned red with embarrassment and anger. "That's impossible. I specifically requested a first-class seat. There must be some mistake." Marcus stood quietly in the aisle, watching this drama unfold. He could see other first-class passengers turning to look at the commotion. Some seemed sympathetic to his situation, while others appeared annoyed by the delay. Patricia remained professional but firm. "Your ticket clearly shows seat 12B. I need to ask you to move to your assigned seat so we can begin takeoff preparations." The situation was about to get much more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The white passenger in seat 2A refused to move, even after Patricia showed him his correct ticket. His face grew redder as he became more agitated, and his voice started to rise above the normal airplane conversation level. "I don't care what that ticket says," he declared loudly. "I paid for a first-class experience, and that's what I'm going to get. There's no way I'm moving to the back of this plane." Marcus remained calm, though inside he felt his frustration growing. He had dealt with difficult people throughout his business career, and he knew that staying composed was usually the best approach. But this situation was different. This wasn't just about business anymore. Patricia tried once more to reason with the stubborn passenger. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but airline regulations require passengers to sit in their assigned seats. If you'd like to upgrade to first class, I can check if any seats are available for purchase." "I shouldn't have to pay extra," the man snapped. "This is clearly some kind of computer error. Just give him a seat somewhere else." He pointed at Marcus without even looking directly at him. Other passengers throughout the first-class cabin were now openly staring at the confrontation. Some whispered among themselves while others shook their heads in disapproval. The tension in the cabin was becoming uncomfortable for everyone. Marcus finally decided to speak up. "Listen, I have an important business meeting in Chicago. I need to get there on time, and I paid for this seat. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable here." The white passenger finally looked directly at Marcus for the first time. His expression showed a mixture of disdain and disbelief. "Business meeting? Right. Look, friend, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is first class. Maybe you're more comfortable back there with your own people." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several passengers gasped audibly. Patricia's mouth fell open in shock. Marcus felt the familiar burn of anger in his chest, but he forced himself to remain steady. A well-dressed woman across the aisle spoke up. "That's completely unacceptable behavior. You should be ashamed of yourself." But the white passenger seemed emboldened by the attention. I'm not moving from this seat. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with the airline. I know my rights. Patricia looked around helplessly. She was clearly out of her depth with this situation. After 20 years of working for the airline, she had never encountered such blatant discrimination from a passenger. She wasn't sure what her next step should be. Just then, Jennifer, the gate attendant who had initially questioned Marcus's ticket, boarded the plane. She had been watching from the jetway and decided to come aboard when she noticed the commotion. "What's going on here?" Jennifer asked, though she seemed to already understand the situation. Patricia quickly explained what was happening. Jennifer listened, but instead of supporting Marcus, she seemed to side with the white passenger who was illegally occupying his seat. "Well," Jennifer said thoughtfully, "maybe we can work out some kind of compromise." "Sir," she said to Marcus, "we have some very nice seats available in premium economy. They're much more spacious than regular coach, and I could probably get you some complimentary snacks and drinks." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I don't want premium economy. I want the first-class seat that I paid for. This isn't complicated." Jennifer's attitude became more defensive. "Sir, I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Sometimes it's easier to be flexible rather than causing problems for other passengers." The white passenger smiled smugly from seat 2A. "See? The lady understands the situation. Why can't you just be reasonable?" Marcus looked around the cabin and realized that most of the other passengers were watching this unfold, like it was entertainment. A few seemed uncomfortable with the obvious discrimination, but no one else was speaking up to support him. That's when Captain James Mitchell emerged from the cockpit. He was a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. He had been preparing for takeoff when he heard about the disturbance in the cabin. "What seems to be the problem here?" Captain Mitchell asked in a calm but authoritative voice. Patricia quickly explained the situation to the captain, showing him both boarding passes and explaining how the white passenger refused to move to his assigned seat. Captain Mitchell examined both tickets carefully. The facts were clear and undisputable. Marcus had the correct ticket for seat 2A, while the other passenger belonged in economy class. "Sir," the captain said to the white passenger, "you need to move to your assigned seat immediately. We cannot take off until all passengers are properly seated." The white passenger's defiance reached a new level. "I'm not moving. This is discrimination against me. I'm being treated unfairly because I'm trying to protect my rights as a passenger." Captain Mitchell's patience was beginning to wear thin. "You are illegally occupying another passenger's seat. If you don't move voluntarily, I'll have to call security to remove you from the aircraft." Jennifer jumped in again, still trying to appease the white passenger. "Captain, maybe we could upgrade the gentleman to first class and move the other passenger to a different section. I'm sure we can find a solution that makes everyone happy." Marcus had heard enough. His voice remained calm, but there was now steel in his tone. "I'm not moving from the seat I paid for. I have just as much right to be here as anyone else on this plane." The captain looked at Jennifer with surprise and disappointment. "Ma'am, this passenger has a valid first-class ticket. There's no reason he should have to move or accept a downgrade." But Jennifer persisted. "Sometimes it's better to avoid conflict. We have to think about the comfort of all our passengers." The white passenger nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. She gets it. Why should everyone else have to suffer because of one person's stubbornness?" Captain Mitchell studied the situation carefully. He had been flying for 25 years and had seen many difficult passenger situations, but this was different. The discrimination was so blatant and the injustice so clear that he knew he had to take a strong stand. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing. He wanted to document what was happening in case he needed evidence later. He took a photo of his boarding pass and started writing notes about the incident. "What are you doing?" Jennifer asked nervously when she saw Marcus with his phone. "I'm documenting this situation," Marcus replied calmly. "I want to make sure there's a record of how I'm being treated." The white passenger laughed mockingly. "Oh, here we go. Now he's going to play the victim card. This is exactly what I expected." But Captain Mitchell was not amused. He looked at Jennifer and Patricia with a serious expression. "Both of you need to understand something. This passenger," he gestured to Marcus, has done nothing wrong. He has a valid ticket, he's been polite and reasonable, and he has every right to sit in the seat he paid for. Jennifer started to protest, but the captain held up his hand. I don't want to hear any more excuses. This situation ends now. Marcus watched as the captain took control of the situation. For the first time since boarding the plane, he felt like someone in authority was actually going to treat him fairly. The captain turned to the white passenger one final time. You have 30 seconds to move to your assigned seat, or I will have security escort you off this aircraft. The standoff was about to reach its climax, and Marcus had no idea that this moment would change everything. The white passenger crossed his arms defiantly and settled deeper into seat 2A. I'm not moving anywhere. Call security if you want, but I know my rights. This is America, and I don't have to take orders from anyone. Captain Mitchell's expression hardened. He reached for the intercom phone and made the call. Within minutes, 2 airport security officers boarded the aircraft. They were professional and courteous as they approached the situation. What's the problem here? Asked the lead security officer, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor. Captain Mitchell explained the situation clearly and showed the security officers both boarding passes. The facts were simple and undisputable. One passenger was sitting in another passenger's assigned seat and refusing to move. The white passenger immediately began protesting to the security officers. This is all a misunderstanding. I belong in first class. These people are trying to discriminate against me because I'm standing up for myself. But the security officers had seen situations like this before. They examined both tickets and spoke quietly with Captain Mitchell. After a brief conversation, they approached the white passenger. Sir, you need to move to your assigned seat or leave the aircraft, the lead officer said firmly. This is not negotiable. The white passenger looked around the cabin desperately, hoping someone would support him. But the other passengers had grown tired of the delay and wanted the situation resolved. A few were openly expressing their frustration with his behavior. This is ridiculous, he shouted. I'm being treated like a criminal for trying to sit in first class. This whole thing is a setup. The security officers remained patient but firm. Sir, we're not going to ask again. You can move to your assigned seat, purchase an upgrade if one is available, or leave the plane. Those are your only options. After several more minutes of arguing, the white passenger finally realized he wasn't going to win this battle. With great reluctance and continued complaints, he gathered his belongings and moved toward the back of the plane, muttering under his breath about unfair treatment and discrimination. Marcus finally took his rightful seat in 2A. He was exhausted from the confrontation and frustrated that something so simple had become such a dramatic ordeal. As he settled in, he noticed that Jennifer was still standing nearby, looking uncomfortable. Captain Mitchell approached Marcus and extended his hand. Mr. Williams, I apologize for what you experienced today. This is not how we want our passengers to be treated. Marcus was surprised that the captain knew his name. He shook the captain's hand and managed a tired smile. Thank you for handling the situation fairly. I was beginning to think I'd never get to my seat. No passenger should have to go through what you just experienced, Captain Mitchell said, sincerely. I want you to know that this behavior doesn't represent the values of our airline. As the captain returned to the cockpit to prepare for takeoff, Marcus noticed that Jennifer was still hovering nearby. She seemed nervous and kept glancing in his direction. Patricia, the head flight attendant, came over to check on Marcus. Is there anything I can get you to make your flight more comfortable? Complimentary drinks, extra snacks, anything at all? Marcus appreciated her kindness, but he was still processing what had happened. I'm fine, thank you. I just want to get to Chicago for my meeting. As the plane finally began to taxi toward the runway, Marcus pulled out his laptop to review his presentation materials. But he found it difficult to concentrate. The incident had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He thought about all the times throughout his career when he had faced similar situations. The bank loan officer who suggested he might be more comfortable with a minority-owned lending institution. The investor who questioned whether he really understood technology, markets. The business partner who seemed surprised by his knowledge and expertise. Marcus had built his success by focusing on results rather than dwelling on prejudice. He let his work speak for itself, and tried not to waste energy on people who couldn't see past his skin color. But today's incident felt different. It was so blatant and public that it brought back all the frustration he thought he had moved past. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Marcus tried to refocus on his upcoming presentation. The meeting in Chicago could transform his company and create opportunities for hundreds of employees. He couldn't let one ignorant passenger derail everything he had worked for. But then something unexpected happened. Jennifer, the gate attendant who had initially questioned his ticket and later suggested he should move to accommodate the white passenger, approached his seat. She looked nervous and uncomfortable as she knelt down beside him. "Mr. Williams," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for how I handled the situation earlier. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Marcus looked at her with surprise. He hadn't expected an apology, especially from someone who had seemed to support the other passenger's position. "I was trying to avoid conflict," Jennifer continued. "But I realize, now that I was being unfair to you. You shouldn't have had to compromise or give up your seat just to make someone else comfortable." Marcus appreciated her apology, but he was curious about what had changed her perspective. "What made you realize that?" Jennifer hesitated before answering. "After the security officers removed the other passenger, I heard some of the other crew members talking about the situation. They helped me understand that I was wrong to suggest you should move. Just because someone is causing a scene doesn't mean they're right." She paused and looked down at her hands. "I also realized that if the situations were reversed, if you had been the one sitting in the wrong seat, I would have asked you to move immediately without any hesitation. That's not fair, and I'm ashamed of myself." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate you saying that. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." Jennifer stood up, looking relieved to have apologized. "I hope the rest of your flight is comfortable. If there's anything you need, please let me know." As Jennifer walked away, Marcus felt a small sense of satisfaction. Maybe the incident would lead to some positive changes in how the airline staff thought about these situations, but he still felt troubled by how easily people had been willing to treat him unfairly. He opened his laptop again and tried to focus on his presentation. The artificial intelligence project he was proposing could revolutionize how companies handled customer service and data analysis. If successful, it would create jobs and generate millions in revenue. But as he reviewed his slides, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the broader implications of what had happened. How many other successful people faced similar discrimination? How many opportunities were lost because of prejudice and assumptions? The plane hit some turbulence, and Marcus gripped his armrest instinctively. He looked out the window at the clouds below and thought about the challenges ahead. The business meeting in Chicago was important, but now he wondered if he should do something more about today's incident. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing notes about everything that had happened. He documented the names of the people involved, the time and flight number, and a detailed description of events. He wasn't sure yet what he would do with this information, but he wanted to have a complete record. As he typed, Marcus realized that this situation had given him a new perspective on his responsibilities as a successful business leader. He had always focused on building his company and creating value for shareholders. But maybe it was time to use his position and influence to address broader issues of fairness and equality. The plane continued toward Chicago, carrying Marcus toward a meeting that would change his business forever. But more importantly, it was carrying him toward a decision that would transform how he used his success and influence to make a difference in the world. The plane landed in Chicago on time, and Marcus gathered his belongings with mixed feelings. The flight had given him time to think about what had happened, but he still felt unsettled by the entire experience. As he walked through the airport terminal, he noticed people going about their normal business, completely unaware of the discrimination he had just faced. Marcus took a taxi to the downtown office building where his meeting was scheduled. The investors he was meeting with were from Quantum Ventures, one of the most prestigious technology investment firms in the country. They had specifically requested this meeting after hearing about Sterling Tech's innovative artificial intelligence project. The presentation went better than Marcus had hoped. The investors were impressed with his company's technology, and excited about the potential for growth. After 2 hours of detailed discussions and demonstrations, they offered him a partnership deal worth $60 million, even more than he had originally hoped for. "Mr. Williams," said Sarah Chen, the lead investor, "your company is exactly what we've been looking for. We believe Sterling Tech has the potential to become a leader in the AI industry." Marcus shook hands with each of the investors, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. This deal would secure his company's future and allow them to expand their operations significantly. All the months of preparation and hard work had paid off. But as he left the meeting and walked back to his hotel, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of what had happened on the plane. The contrast between how he was treated by the airline staff and how he was respected by these sophisticated investors was striking. Back in his hotel room, Marcus called his wife Angela to share the good news about the successful meeting. Angela had been his partner through all the ups and downs of building their business, and she deserved to hear about this victory. "That's wonderful, Marcus," Angela said excitedly. "I knew they would see how valuable your work is. This is going to change everything for the company." Marcus told her about the investment deal and the opportunities it would create. But then he found himself describing what had happened on the airplane. As he recounted the incident, he could hear the anger in his own voice. "I can't believe they treated you that way," Angela said. "Even after all your success, people still make assumptions based on how you look. It's infuriating." "What bothers me most," Marcus said, "is how easily the airline staff were willing to ask me to give up my seat to avoid conflict. They were more concerned about appeasing a disruptive passenger than protecting my rights." Angela was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do about it?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question throughout the day. "I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to just move on and focus on the business. But another part of me thinks I need to do something to make sure this doesn't happen to other people." That evening, Marcus did some research on the airline company. He discovered that it was a major carrier with thousands of employees and millions of passengers each year. The company had a public commitment to diversity and inclusion, but Marcus's experience suggested there might be a gap between their policies and their actual practices. He also learned something that surprised him. The airline was partially owned by a private equity firm that was struggling financially. Several news articles mentioned that the company was looking for new investors and considering various strategic partnerships. Marcus spent the next morning making phone calls to his business contacts and financial advisors. He wanted to understand more about the airline's ownership structure and business operations. By lunchtime, he had gathered enough information to formulate a plan. The airline company, Global Airways, was indeed in need of capital investment. They had been hit hard by recent economic challenges and were actively seeking new investors. Most importantly, Marcus discovered that he had more than enough resources to make a significant investment in the company. That afternoon, Marcus called his attorney, David Rodriguez, who had helped him with many business deals over the years. "David, I need you to research the possibility of acquiring a major stake in Global Airways," Marcus said. "I want to know what it would take to have significant influence over their operations." David was surprised by the request. "That's quite a departure from your usual technology investments. What's driving your interest in the airline industry?" Marcus explained what had happened during his flight and his desire to make changes from within the company. "I don't just want to file a complaint or seek monetary compensation. I want to create systemic change that will prevent this from happening to other passengers." "That's an ambitious goal," David said. "But if you're serious about this, I can start researching the company's ownership structure and financial position. An investment of that size would definitely get their attention." Over the next few days, while Marcus was still in Chicago, David worked with a team of financial analysts to evaluate the airline acquisition opportunity. They discovered that Global Airways was more vulnerable than most people realized. The company was profitable but had significant debt and limited cash reserves. Marcus's proposed investment would give him approximately 30% ownership of the airline and a seat on the board of directors. More importantly, the investment would come with specific requirements for changes in company policies and employee training. "This is definitely feasible," David reported during a conference call. "Your investment would be substantial enough to give you real influence over company operations, But are you sure you want to commit this much capital to make a point about discrimination? Marcus had thought carefully about the financial implications. The investment would be significant, but his technology company was generating enough profit to support it. More importantly, he saw this as an opportunity to create positive change while also diversifying his business portfolio. It's not just about making a point, Marcus explained. If I can help create a more fair and inclusive environment for all passengers while also earning a good return on my investment, that's a win-win situation. The legal team worked quickly to prepare the necessary documents and financial proposals. Within a week, they were ready to present Marcus's investment offer to Global Airways' board of directors. Marcus returned to his home office feeling energized by the possibilities. He had turned a negative experience into an opportunity to create meaningful change. But he also knew that the real work was just beginning. He called a meeting with his senior management team at Sterling Tech to discuss the proposed airline investment. His executives were surprised by the idea but supportive of Marcus's vision. "This is definitely outside our usual business focus," said his chief financial officer, Janet Morrison. "But I can see the strategic value in diversifying our investments. Plus, if you can really influence positive changes in the airline industry, that would be significant." Marcus's head of human resources, Robert Kim, was particularly enthusiastic about the idea. "We've always talked about corporate responsibility and making a positive impact. This would be a concrete way to address discrimination and create better experiences for travelers." As the team discussed the proposal, Marcus felt confident that he was making the right decision. He had the financial resources, the business expertise, and now the motivation to create real change. The next step would be presenting his investment offer to Global Airways. Marcus had no idea how the airline's executives would react to his proposal, but he was prepared for whatever response they might have. He spent the evening reviewing all the documents and preparing for what could be the most important business negotiation of his career. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about using his success and influence to fight against the kind of discrimination he had experienced firsthand. Marcus's attorney, David Rodriguez, called him early Monday morning with important news. "I've set up a meeting with Global Airways' board of directors for Wednesday. They're very interested in your investment proposal, especially given the size of the offer." The meeting was scheduled at Global Airways' corporate headquarters in Atlanta. Marcus flew there on Tuesday evening, this time choosing to fly with a different airline to avoid any potential complications. He wanted to focus entirely on the upcoming negotiation. Wednesday morning, Marcus arrived at the sleek glass office, building that housed Global Airways executive offices. He was dressed in his best suit and carried a leather briefcase containing detailed financial projections and proposed policy changes. The boardroom was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Around the large conference table sat 8 members of Global Airways' board of directors, including the company's CEO, president, and chief financial officer. "Mr. Williams," said CEO Richard Thompson, a distinguished man in his early 60s, "we appreciate you considering Global Airways as an investment opportunity. Your proposal is quite substantial." Marcus had prepared extensively for this moment. "Thank you for meeting with me. I believe this investment can benefit both parties significantly." He began his presentation by outlining Sterling Tech's success and his track record as an investor. The board members listened attentively as he described his company's growth and profitability over the past decade. Then Marcus shifted to discussing Global Airways' financial situation and growth potential. He had done his homework thoroughly and presented detailed analysis of the airline industry and specific opportunities for expansion. "Your airline has strong brand recognition and an excellent safety record," Marcus said. "With proper investment and strategic changes, I believe Global Airways can become even more profitable and competitive." The board members asked various questions about the financial aspects of his proposal. They seemed impressed with his business acumen and the thoroughness of his analysis. But then Marcus moved to the more sensitive part of his presentation. "My investment comes with some specific requirements regarding company policies and employee training." He pulled out a detailed document outlining proposed changes to the airline's customer service policies, discrimination prevention measures, and employee training programs. I want to ensure that all passengers are treated with equal respect and dignity, regardless of their background or appearance, Marcus explained. This includes mandatory training for all customer-facing employees on cultural sensitivity and anti-discrimination practices. The board members exchanged glances. CEO Thompson leaned forward with a puzzled expression. Mr. Williams, these are certainly admirable goals, but they seem quite specific. Is there a particular reason you're focused on these issues? Marcus had anticipated this question and was prepared to be completely honest. 2 weeks ago, I flew on one of your aircraft and experienced significant discrimination from your staff. I was questioned about my right to sit in first class and pressured to give up my assigned seat to accommodate a disruptive white passenger. The room fell silent. Several board members looked uncomfortable, while others seemed genuinely shocked. Thompson's expression grew serious. That's very concerning to hear. Do you have documentation of this incident? Marcus pulled out his detailed notes from the flight, including photos of his boarding pass and names of the staff members involved. He presented a comprehensive account of everything that had happened. I've spoken with my attorneys about filing a lawsuit, Marcus continued. But I believe there's a better way to address this problem. Rather than seeking individual compensation, I want to invest in systemic changes that will prevent similar incidents in the future. The Chief Financial Officer, Mary Stevens, spoke up. Mr. Williams, if what you're describing actually happened, it represents a serious failure in our customer service standards. We would want to investigate this immediately regardless of any potential investment. Marcus appreciated her response. I'm glad to hear that, but my concern is that this might not be an isolated incident. Without proper training and clear policies, other passengers could face similar discrimination. President of Operations James Bradley looked troubled. We do have policies against discrimination, but perhaps they need to be strengthened and better communicated to our staff. For the next hour, the board discussed Marcus's proposed policy changes in detail. His requirements included mandatory annual training for all employees, clear procedures for handling discrimination complaints, and regular audits of customer service practices. These changes would require significant investment in training and new procedures, Thompson noted. But if they help us provide better service to all passengers, they could actually improve our bottom line. Marcus was encouraged by their receptive attitude. Excellent customer service benefits everyone. When passengers feel respected and valued, they're more likely to become loyal customers and recommend your airline to others. The board took a short recess to discuss the proposal privately. Marcus waited in a